All right, let's talk. Tip culture.
Purchasing an office chair online, and they're asking me if I want to leave a tip.
25, 20, 18% tip. For what?
Tipping culture has gone way too far.
So I got a question for you all right? Both the ladies and the fellas. Ladies, we'll start with you. When you go to the salon, right, to get your hair done, and when you go to the nail shop to get those pretty nails done, right, do you all tip your beauticians? If so, how much? How much are you ladies tipping your beauticians? Fellas, when you go and get a clean cut or a nice lineup, right, at the barbershop, are you tipping your barber on top of the already egregious prices for a haircut these days? If so, how much? I really want to know. I really do hope y'all answer these questions down in the comments. 2 months ago, there was a series of videos being put out by various content creators all over the YouTube space on the state of the tip culture here in America. And the message was very plain and clear, okay? Businesses, and more specifically restaurants and eateries, okay, are asking you all to tip even though, okay, even if they're not necessarily providing you with a service, to rationalize tipping them extra money. It doesn't matter where you go. It seems like somebody is shoving a tablet in your face and a screen asking you how much you would like to tip.
Nowadays, you're asked for a tip nearly everywhere.
Are we tipping at drive-thrus?
15, 20% on a sweatshirt purchase.
If you're frustrated, you're not alone. A survey by Bankrate found that a third of people are annoyed by those pre-entered tip screens and think tipping culture has gotten
Out of control.
Businesses and cities have tried to move away from tipping, but
I don't see any kind of a future where tipping completely goes away.
that's Dr. Mike Lynn, a Cornell psychologist who studies consumer behavior.
I've done more research on tipping than anybody else.
And he'll help us explain why the US became so dependent on tipping, why it seems to be everywhere now, and why we're probably not getting rid of it.
I remember when this all first started, one of the places I love to go to satisfy my Nashville hot chicken craving, right, is this place near me, okay, place called the Crimson Coward, okay? It's just a few blocks from me. And they specialize in Nashville hot chicken. But the thing that really makes their food stand out above everyone else is that all of the meat they sell is halal. Okay, and if you've never had halal meat or halal chicken compared to normal chicken, you can immediately, trust me, you can immediately tell the difference in both the taste and the texture and just the quality of the meat, which is why halal meat tends to cost a bit more, because the preparation that goes into it and into cooking it is going to be a little bit more costly, right? It takes more. But hey, listen, I'm okay with paying more money for higher quality food. So that's not a problem for me. But where they started to lose favor with me, okay, is that one day I went in to pick up my order. And I get to the counter to pay for my food, and there's a tablet that asks me to tip for picking up my food, for picking up my order. You all, listen, I was confused. I'm picking up my food. I am, which by itself is not cheap, right? But fine. I'm willing to pay, like I said. But on top of the higher priced food, you're also asking me to tip? For what exactly? I don't understand for the life of me why any establishment would expect you to tip for picking up your own order.
Tipping really became popular after the Civil War, when formerly enslaved Black Americans went into service positions like waiters and railroad porters.
And the railroad industry deliberately paid them low wages on account of their ability to work for tips. And arguably, it was this influx of service workers who were receiving low wages that contributed to the growth of tipping.
By the early 1900s, as minimum wages were being established, tipped workers were initially excluded. Until 1966, when tipped workers were given their own minimum wage. It was raised to $2.13 in 1991, where it stayed ever since.
Consumers in this country are aware that servers make a substandard minimum wage, and that contributes to their willingness and desire to tip them.
Some states require employers to pay just that tipped minimum wage to workers, where some states like California and Minnesota require them to pay workers the full minimum wage, and then tips are added onto that. And those minimum wages affect how people tip.
I was able to get data from credit card payment system providers on charge sales and charge tips in restaurants across states. And what I find is the smaller the wages servers are paid, the higher the percentage tip.
In other words, he found that people know their tips are how workers get paid, so they tip more when they know workers are being paid less.
We're not talking about door dashing where the delivery prices are baked right into the total cost of the food. No, we're talking about you paying random tips on top of the price that you're already paying for your food that you had to retrieve yourself. They did a survey on the psychology of tipping here in the United States and found that customers are more likely to tip when they feel like they're being watched by someone. You know, when you go and you pay for your food and someone's behind the register and they're watching the screen or they're watching you, people feel more inclined to tip then. And this doesn't just stop at ordering food from restaurants. Tipflation in our economy has caused everybody, everyday normal spending to become grossly overpriced. Listen, I'm the type of person that believes that when you go to a sit-down restaurant, okay, you sit there with your family or you go with your friends and you're being waited on, that you need to come ready to tip. I believe that strongly. You need to figure that into your budget for that meal because it's understood that tips are how waiters and waitresses make their money. So oftentimes I'll ask my server for their Cash App so I can, just tip them directly. And that system has worked for decades. Why? Because the tipping system was a way to reward servers and motivate them to do a great job and provide great service, right? So it was a win-win. It was a win for the server who hopefully provided great service and got a good tip. It was a win for the establishment because their margins were kept in check due to the cost of paying their hosts very little and that cost being pushed off onto the customer. And it was a win for the customer because hopefully they left happy and satisfied with their service and a belly full of food, right? It was a win-win-win for everybody involved. But what's happening in today's economy is that more businesses are trying to benefit from tip culture to increase their margins, not necessarily in order to compensate their workers. And the new idea of tipping for no reason is spreading like wildfire. You go get ice cream from Dairy Queen and there's a screen that pops up asking you if you want to tip after your order. And my question is, what are we tipping here? What are we tipping? The ice cream has already been paid for, right? They're not back there churning the ice cream by hand. So there's literally a machine doing all the work. What are we tipping here? That's like, imagine you walking into a Home Depot and you ask one of the associates, what's the best kind of wood to use to build a deck outside? And they tell you that, hey, you want to get pressure treated lumber, right? Because otherwise it's going to warp and stain and you don't want that, right? And you say, okay, well, thanks, thank you for that. And before you turn to start loading your cart with that pressure treated lumber, they stick their hand out asking you for a tip. It's the same thing. That's literally what's happening today. And instead of the employer paying their associates and workers more money, they're trying to pawn the adequate compensation off onto the customer, you and I, who is now effectively paying out-of-pocket expenses twice in one transaction. Listen, when you take a job, okay, they explain to you everything, including your compensation and hourly wages. If you're not satisfied or feel like you need to be making more money, then that's not a problem you need to really take up with the customer. It's a bigger conversation that you need to have with your employer or just, choose a different job. But now here's the flip side of that, okay? Here's the flip side. If restaurants actually started paying their servers better hourly wages, you can be damn sure that those menu costs would have to increase by nearly the same amount or more, okay? And at face value, that's not what the majority of Americans want. It's really interesting, the psychology behind tip culture, because moreover, the general consensus is that people just want to feel like they're in control over how much money they're paying out versus being charged a higher cost up front. In practice, surveys say that we don't like when there's an automatic gratuity included in the bill, even if we would just end up paying the same amount if we included a tip anyway.
In that same Bankrate survey, 41% of people said businesses should pay their employees better, rather than relying so much on tips. But in practice, people don't like that.
I've done the research where I give people hypothetical menus. One where they have regular prices, and at the bottom it says a customary tip of 15 to 20% is appreciated. One where they say tipping's not allowed, you can't tip, but their menu prices are 15% higher.
He then asked people how expensive they thought the restaurant was. People overwhelmingly thought the menu with the 15% higher prices was more expensive than a menu where they would tip 15% or more anyway. Other menus that stated an 18 or 15% gratuity would be automatically added were also viewed as more expensive.
We're not rational. We're cognitive misers. We don't like to add all of the factors together and make logical, rational comparisons. We do quick and dirty heuristics.
It's called price partitioning. You see it with hotel listings or concert tickets, with all kinds of fees tacked on at the end.
Partitioning prices often makes things seem less expensive than if you were to build all of the cost and be upfront in one big price.
Aside from this, there's another problem. While we, the customer, think tipping culture is crazy and out of hand, the servers who work inside of these restaurants actually prefer to keep things the way they are, with customers tipping them versus making a higher hourly wage, because many servers are making upwards of $40 to $50 an hour, depending on the day. So obviously, you wouldn't want to switch to a payout model where you get compensated a lower hourly rate with no tips included. So, well, what's the solution here, right? Well, the answer could lie in an alternative that many of you are not fond of, and that is simply cooking at home. It's cheaper, you get leftovers, maybe for the next day, and you control how much salt and seasoning that goes into your meal. Listen, I know it's not the American way, all right? But other than that, listen, your only option is to just go and pick up your food versus having it delivered. And please don't feel bad about not tipping when you are picking up your own order. If it's in your heart to do so, then by all means, go ahead and tip. But you all let me know what you think about the tip culture here in America, where it's at, how bad it's gotten, or maybe you don't think it's gotten bad at all. Tell me if it's something that you think is out of hand, and let me know down in the comments. I will be reading. And I'll see you all in the next video. Shout out to the servers.